Mr. Spiller, what is this Texas State Board of Dental Examiners doing enforcing immigration law?
Well, I don't think that the bill was designed specifically to include that particular group. There are several, frankly, that are included in the definition of peace officers in the Code of Criminal Procedure. I don't, you know.
What about the General Services Commission?
You know, I think that certainly if they're peace officers and they see a violation, just like they could with any other violation of law, they have the ability, the authority, and the knowledge to handle a matter like that. And so I don't think that they would operate in a vacuum. And I think, quite frankly, you would have obviously less of some of the folks that are listed as peace officers under that article that would be enforcing this. Obviously, the vast majority would be DPS and DPS-related folks. And quite frankly, even though it's a statewide bill, most of the time, I would guess that it would be close to the place of the violation, which would be, I would think the vast majority of these occurrences would be, and encounters would be, within 50 to 100 miles of the border. So,
does your bill say that this bill only applies to 50 or 100 miles of the border?
No, it does not, and because we need protection throughout the state. And so, again, it gives all law enforcement
why doesn't your bill say 50 or 100 miles to the border?
No,
if that is your intent.
Well, that's not my intent. I'm just saying from a practical standpoint, that's probably, I would guess that would be where most of the encounters would occur. Common sense would say that, but that doesn't mean that the bill is limited to that. I didn't mean to limit it to that.
Now, I understand enforcement of regular criminal laws, right? Because these are all licensed officers. They're all trained to enforce regular criminal statutes. Would that be fair?
Yes, I mean, generally.
Now, the General Services Commission actually is not an agency that even exists anymore.
Well,
why do you think that if they had officers, that the General Services Commission, that they would have purview over, why would they have purview or training over immigration issues?
Because they're certified peace officers in the state of Texas. And so this bill is not limited to just DPS. It's not limited to just commissioned officers of DPS. It applies to all peace officers to give everyone that's a peace officer the ability and the authority to enforce this, just like they would with any other provision, whether it be in the penal code, health and safety code, any of the codes that apply penal code and criminal provisions.
Yeah, but and you keep mentioning the penal code and the criminal code and all this other stuff. Officers through T-Close and through their regular training are trained on general law, but they're not trained on immigration law. You know that, right?
Well, I'm feel certain that they get the training that they need. It may very well be that DPS and others may look at providing
Is there anything in your bill that provides them with training?
This is not a training bill, so that's not contained in my bill. Right.
Now, is there anything in your bill that provides funding for training?
I don't know. We put a lot of funding in Operation Lone Star. I would assume that some could be allocated for that if it was necessary.
Do you know if state law enforcement in Texas has access to any kind of special system where they can check on someone's immigration status?
I'm sorry, where they could check on someone what?
Immigration status.
I don't know the answer to that question. I would assume that they could. It certainly would be available to them if the need arises. So I think, certainly peace officers have the ability to stop anyone and make, anytime that you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that a criminal offense has occurred, and they're entitled to, and they do on a regular basis, to inquire into those matters.
See, earlier we had this conversation about officers viewing criminal acts and say, like, well, the officer, you kind of asked the question of, like, when is it ever that we require an officer to actually see the criminal act occur? But that, in fact, is actually how a lot of people get arrested, a lot of people get charged, that the officer actually sees the criminal act, they know the criminal act has occurred, and therefore they make the arrest. if you're going to
obviously,
say that
yeah.
someone's going to enforce immigration law and say you entered illegally, or I'm going to charge you with illegal entry, how does that officer, how do these officers, one, have the training to do it, and two, actually know?
Well,
because the dental board's not on the border. The General Services Commission is not on the border. The Lottery Commission is not on the border.
Right.
How do they know, other than the color of somebody's skin, that this is an undocumented immigrant?
Well, you know as well as I do that there are certain criminal offenses that are on view that any peace officer sees that occurs. Obviously, you don't have too many traffic stops or DWIs that happen in a vacuum and happen on what someone else told someone. But the vast majority, I would think, of many criminal cases are not seen and viewed
but
like
Mr.
an on-view
Spiller,
offense.
Representative Spiller, your legislation that you are filing right now, that you are proposing to this body, you are creating a criminal offense of immigration based on immigration law. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call it a state immigration law. I don't believe that Texas necessarily has the authority. In my personal opinion, I may be wrong, but I don't know that we have the authority to make state immigration law. Immigration law.
So it is your statement right now, as the author of this bill, that the state of Texas does not have the authority to create immigration law. Is that correct?
I didn't say that. I said I don't know that they do. That's not really the purpose of this bill. This bill is not deemed a state immigration law. It's Texas creating a criminal offense for illegal entry and for illegal reentry. And certainly we have the authority to do that, as you know, and as I've stated earlier, that law is the laws under the federal system.
Illegal entry into what?
On the books for decades.
I'm sorry, you're saying that you're not making immigration law, but you have an offense called illegal entry. Illegal entry into what?
Into the state of Texas from a foreign country.
Is the state of Texas its own nation?
What's that?
Are you putting this legislation on with the belief that Texas is its own nation and has its own immigration laws?
No, there are probably some that would like for me to say that, but I'm not saying Texas is its own
as an
nation.
attorney, would you say that?
No, we are a republic.
The illegal entry that I assume that you're talking about is entering into the United States of America. Is that correct? And not just the state of Texas?
Well, Texas is a part of the United States of America.
Yes,
the last time I checked.
it is.
Yes.
Despite the objections of some of our colleagues. Okay, so does the state of Texas have its own immigration law?
This is not Texas creating its own immigration law.
I didn't ask that. I'm saying, this legislation aside, does the state of Texas have its own immigration law?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that would meet the definition of immigration, because generally that would be under the federal scope.
So the only laws that say who is or is not here lawfully is federal law, correct?
I don't know that that's correct. I don't know that that's
correct. Does Texas have its own immigration law?
If we pass this bill, we certainly have this bill to rely on.
I'm sorry?
The issue is irrelevant if we pass this bill.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry.
Could you say that one more time?
I'm saying the issue is irrelevant if we pass this bill. We certainly will have a bill that provides for a criminal offense for illegal entry and illegal reentry.
So the intent of this legislation is to create Texas immigration law?
No, you keep wanting me to say that, and I'll keep giving you the same answer, that I'm not saying whether Texas has the right to do immigration law. Frankly, my personal opinion is that we don't. That's not the purpose of this bill. The purpose of this bill is to pass a state criminal statute that prohibits illegal entry and illegal reentry.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Saved by the bell.